Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. My name is Mohammed Saleh. On the 3rd of January, barely 2 days after Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro had made yet another attempt to engage with the American President Donald Trump, offering cooperation on fighting drug trafficking and illegal migration, the United States attacked the capital city of Caracas and the states of Miranda, Aragua and La Guaira early in the morning. According to eyewitnesses, multiple explosions beginning at about 2 a.m. local time rocked the capital Caracas and other areas. So as explosions rocked Caracas, plumes of smoke and helicopters were seen flying over the Venezuelan capital. Soon afterwards, the American President Donald Trump took the world by surprise by issuing a statement that the American forces had captured the Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro after launching a large-scale strike on the South American nation. Our next report gets you the details.
The oil-rich but economically troubled Latin American nation of Venezuela, for long in the crosshairs of the world's mightiest military, was in for a rude shock early on Saturday morning. In a dramatic, fast and furious night, Caracas was rocked by explosions, accompanied by the sound of helicopters around 2 a.m. local time. Reportedly, Fuerte Tiuna, Venezuela's largest military complex, situated in the south of Caracas, and Carlota Air Base in the north, were among the targets of the US strikes. Blasts were also heard in La Guaira, north of the capital, where Caracas's airport and port are located. The Venezuelan Defense Ministry accused the United States of targeting residential areas and announced a massive deployment of its military resources. The government, in a statement read out on state television, was quick to announce that President Nicolas Maduro, who had earlier decried coups d'etat orchestrated by the CIA, had declared a state of emergency, but the 63-year-old socialist was himself nowhere to be seen.
Today more than ever, President Nicolas Maduro is loyal to the Constitution to protect his people, and he has released the following statement, which we will read to make it known to the country and the people of the world. The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela rejects, condemns, and denounces before the international community the grave military aggression perpetrated by the current government of the United States of America against Venezuelan territory and population in the civilian and military areas of the city of Caracas, the capital of the Republic, and the states of Miranda, Aragua, and La Guaira. This act constitutes a flagrant violation of the Charter of the United Nations, particularly Articles 1 and 2, which enshrine respect for sovereignty, the legal equality of states, and the prohibition of the use of force. Such aggression threatens international peace and stability, specifically in Latin America and the Caribbean, and places the lives of millions of people at serious risk. The objective of this attack is none other than to seize Venezuela's strategic resources, particularly its oil and minerals, attempting to break the nation's political independence by force.
About 2 hours after explosions rocked Venezuela's capital Caracas, the US President Donald Trump announced on social media that US forces had captured Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro, along with his wife, and flown them out of the country after launching a large-scale strike on the South American country. Later in the day, addressing a press conference, Trump lauded the assault he described as not witnessed since World War II, further adding that the United States is going to run Venezuela.
At my direction, the United States Armed Forces conducted an extraordinary military operation in the capital of Venezuela. Overwhelming American military power, air, land, and sea, was used to launch a spectacular assault, and it was an assault like people have not seen since World War II. We're there now, and what people don't understand, but they understand as I say this, we're there now, but we're going to stay until such time as the proper transition can take place. So we're going to stay until such time as we're going to run it, essentially, until such time as a proper transition can take place.
It is to be noted that earlier in the week, on Monday, Trump had said that it would be smart for Maduro, whose re-election in 2024 he had dismissed as fraudulent, to step down. Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, expressing no knowledge of the whereabouts of Maduro, demanded immediate proof of life for President Nicolas Maduro and the First Lady, Cilia Flores. The bombing and the abduction of a sitting president, along with his wife, is unlike anything seen in recent history. One needs to go as far back as in 1989, when Panamanian leader Manuel Noriega was captured by US Special Forces from the Vatican Embassy. While there are many questions that still need to be answered, one thing is certain: this unprecedented large-scale strike and the capture of a sitting president of a sovereign nation puts a big question mark on the self-anointed role of the United States as the leader of the free world and a champion of democracy and freedom.
The Islamic Republic of Iran has witnessed daily protests since the 28th of December over the soaring cost of living crisis. At least about 7 people have been killed and dozens more have been wounded in the clashes between the protesters and the security forces. Though the protests are relatively smaller in scale than the Nation 2022 unrest, which took place following the death in police custody of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, who was accused by the morality police of not wearing a hijab properly. The Iranian government has now adopted a much more cautious approach this time round, with President Masoud Pezeshkian saying that his government will listen to the legitimate demands of the protesters. On Friday, the American President Donald Trump threatened of getting involved with American weapons that are locked and loaded if Iran kills any innocent protesters, prompting Tehran to issue a warning that any American meddling could end up destabilizing the whole region. Our next report gets more details.
On the 28th of December, shopkeepers in the capital Tehran, angered by yet another sharp fall in the value of the Iranian currency, went on strike over high prices and economic stagnation. What began as peaceful protests in Tehran soon spread to at least 15 cities, largely in the west of the country. By Tuesday, students from at least 10 universities were involved, and the chorus against the country's clerical rulers was growing. While many called for an end to Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's reign, some expressed a desire for a return to monarchy. A protest movement with political demands swept across the country. Cars were set ablaze and clashes were reported between protesters and security forces in several Iranian cities on Thursday, the 5th day of protests, when at least 6 people were killed. Reportedly, 2 people died in clashes between protesters and security forces in the southwestern city of Lordigan. 3 people were killed in Azna and another in Kudasht, all in the west of the country. Adopting a cautious approach, Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian acknowledged on Thursday that failings by the authorities were behind the crisis in Iran that has sparked protests across the country.
People are dissatisfied. We are at fault. You are at fault. Do not go after America as the one to blame. Do not go after, I don't know, some other person to blame. It is we who must serve, and they must be satisfied with us. It is we who must properly manage our resources. It is we who must find a way and solve the problem. It is we who must make the effort and find solutions to these problems for them.
Notwithstanding the change in approach, the authorities have promised to take a firm stance and warned against exploitation of the situation to sow chaos. The unrest, 3 years after the 2022 nationwide protests, has come at a critical moment for Iran as Western sanctions hammer an economy already hit by 40% inflation, and after airstrikes by Israel and the United States in June targeted the country's nuclear infrastructure and military leadership. On Friday, the American President, Donald Trump, adopted yet again the self-anointed role of a savior, proclaiming that the United States is locked and loaded to respond if Iran kills innocent protesters. In response, the head of Iran's top security body, Ali Larijani, promptly warned Trump that U.S. interference in this internal matter would mean destabilizing the entire region and destroying America's interest. Larijani further added that the U.S. president should be mindful of their soldiers' safety. Noteworthy is the fact that Iran's economy has been battered by years of crushing international sanctions over its nuclear program, with raging inflation and a collapsing currency. The protest movement comes at a time when Iran has been weakened following major blows dealt to its regional allies, including in Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria. Which brings us to an all-important question. Could these protests spiral into a more widespread or sustainable movement, one that will lead to regime change in theocratic Iran?
Since 2014, Yemen has been in the throes of a civil war when the Iran-aligned Houthis ousted the internationally recognized government from the capital city of Sana'a, forcing them to flee south. A year afterwards, the conflict escalated when the Saudi-led coalition of the Arab states intervened in a bid to restore the government's rule. The Southern Transitional Council, or the STC, was initially a part of the Saudi-led alliance that intervened in Yemen against the Houthis. But in recent years, the group has turned on the government and has sought self-rule in the south. More than 150,000 people have been killed in the decades-long conflict, triggering one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. Our next report gets you more details.
About a decade ago, in a bid to counter the Houthis, Riyadh pulled together a military coalition that included Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and the Yemen's main southern separatist group, the Southern Transitional Council. However, in recent years, the UAE-backed Southern Transitional Council and its allies have turned on the government and gradually seized control of Aden and much of the south of the country. Saudi Arabia and the internationally recognized Yemeni government that it backs have accused the United Arab Emirates of arming the Southern Transitional Council and pushing it to seize parts of the Hadramaut and Al-Mahra provinces in southern Yemen last month. The Southern Transitional Council's growing presence in these provinces bordering Saudi Arabia has triggered warning from Riyadh, which views the growing belligerence as a threat to its national security. Rejecting these allegations, the United Arab Emirates has said that it is committed to Saudi Arabia's security, but that didn't diffuse tensions as before dawn on the 30th of December, the Saudi-led coalition fighting Yemen's Houthi rebels struck an Emirati shipment at Mukalla port, alleging that it was carrying weapons for the separatists, a claim the United Arab Emirates denied.
What happened today is unacceptable to God or his messenger. At around 3:30 or 4 in the morning, they bombed the port, as you can see, and we were affected. Our windows were shattered, the doors were broken, the children were terrified, and the women frightened. This is completely unacceptable. Who will compensate us now for the damage that occurred? We hold everyone responsible for this heinous act and demand that the local authorities and the relevant bodies take action and provide compensation for all the damages.
Reportedly, dozens of parked military vehicles and pickups were burnt out and smoldering as workers hosed them down. Tuesday's pre-dawn strikes were meant to send a message of sorts following Southern Transitional Council's march across resource-rich Hadramaut and Mahra provinces this month, bringing fresh upheaval after a decade-long civil war. Responding to the strikes, the United Arab Emirates said that it was pulling its remaining forces out of Yemen, following a Saudi demand to withdraw within 24 hours. It is to be noted that the United Arab Emirates had pulled out most of its forces in 2019, leaving only a limited number in the government-run south, where a patchwork of militias holds sway. The rapid advance has also raised the specter of the return of South Yemen, a separate state from 1967 to 1990. On Thursday, the supporters of the separatist group, the Southern Transitional Council, rallied in the southern port city of Aden to demand secession from the north.
We demand that the political leadership, represented by President Idris bin Qasim al-Zubaydi, to restore the state of South Arabia. This is the will of the people. Our people will not back down or retreat from their demands to restore the state of South Arabia. We are all here, standing with the free people of the South, children, women, men, and the elderly, to demand that our political leadership and the whole world restore our state of South Arabia.
On Friday, the Southern Transitional Council accused Saudi Arabia of bombing its forces near the border. Reportedly, 7 people were killed and 20 others were wounded in the airstrikes launched by Saudi Arabia. While both the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia have expressed a willingness to engage in dialogue, the Southern Transitional Council has remained defiant, insisting that there was no thinking about withdrawal from its newly seized positions. Will the separatist group's staggering advance and its renewed determination to establish a new state come to fruition? Well, that might be a tough task at this stage, but the lightning offensive of the separatists sure has embarrassed Saudi Arabia, the regional heavyweight.
China staged one of its biggest military drills around Taiwan, simulating the blockade and seizure of some of the key areas of the autonomously governed island. Codenamed Justice Mission 2025, the drills took place just days after the US announced the sale of one of its largest weapons packages to Taiwan worth about $11 billion. This move has now drawn some sharp protests from Beijing, which in turn has sanctioned the US defense firms. And these drills were explicitly aimed at practicing how to deny any foreign military access to Taiwan. Now, China's Defense Ministry spokesperson Zhao Jiagong was even more explicit. He clearly spelled out, without naming any country, that China's adversaries should abandon the illusion of using Taiwan to contain China and to refrain from challenging China's resolve to defend its core interests. Our next report gets you more.
More than 122 fighter jets and over 22 of China's best warships were deployed to simulate the blockade and seizure of Taiwan's military assets. China's intentions are clear. It will one day isolate Taiwan militarily and capture the island that it considers to be its renegade province. Beijing is currently practicing what it one day will actually carry out. The drills this time involve the second highest number of fighter jets that China has flown in the skies around Taiwan. Following a record that was set in October 2024, when 153 fighter jets and other warplanes were flown around the island for over 25 hours. China's Eastern Command fired a total of 27 rockets in 2 waves, which landed in waters north and southwest of Taiwan. Some of the rockets landed at positions closer than before compared to previous military drills. And in Taiwan, more than 6,000 travelers were affected, with 76 domestic flights canceled and 14 domestic flights delayed.
Taiwan is part of China. Any external forces attempting to interfere in the Taiwan question and meddle in China's internal affairs are doomed to be met with the powerful strength of the Chinese PLA. The historical trend toward national reunification is unstoppable. No one should underestimate our firm resolve, strong will, and formidable capability to safeguard national sovereignty and territorial integrity.
In response, Taiwan's military deployed obstacles described as explosive barrels at an important river mouth north of Taipei. As part of a series of emergency combat readiness drills, barrels were seen being loaded onto M3 amphibious rig bridges and then lowered into the water across the river, leading into the heart of Taipei from Taiwan's north coast. Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te in his New Year's address said that the island is determined to defend its sovereignty and to boost its defenses in the face of China's increasing expansion.
As for what you mentioned, that China hopes to be ready to attack Taiwan by 2027, whether it can achieve its goal on schedule is another matter. For Taiwan, the most important thing is, as stated in The Art of War by Sun Tzu, rely not on the likelihood of the enemy's not coming, but on our own readiness to receive him. We must make the worst assumptions and also make the best preparations. Therefore, the coming year, 2026, is a very critical year for Taiwan.
China's ruling Communist Party claims the self-governing democracy of Taiwan as its own territory, despite never having controlled it, and has vowed to take control of the island by force if necessary. 2027 is the year that many military experts predict is when the dragon will make its military swoop on Taiwan.
On the 29th of December, 6 Islamic State group militants were killed in the northwestern Turkish town of Yalova, situated on the shores of the Sea of Marmara, about 90 kilometers southeast of Istanbul. Reportedly, the police teams had launched an early morning operation on a house believed to contain militants, who had opened fire, killing 3 officers and injuring 9 others. The next day, more than 350 suspected Islamic State militants were detained as part of a nationwide police operation across Türkiye. In little over a span of a week, nearly about 600 people have been arrested in these anti-Islamic State group raids in Türkiye. Our next report gets you more details.
The Republic of Türkiye shares a 900-kilometer border with Syria, where the Islamic State militant group, whose power has been significantly diminished, continues to operate in parts of the country. Over the past decade, the dreaded group has staged several major attacks in Europe, including one in Istanbul in 2017. Turkey's security services frequently target people with suspected links to the Islamic State group. With the advent of the festive season, the Turkish security forces stepped up their efforts and arrested 115 suspected Islamic State members on the 25th of December, following an intelligence warning that the extremist group was planning attacks during Christmas and New Year celebrations. 3 days later, 3 police officers and 6 alleged militants were killed during an 8-hour siege in the northwestern town of Yalova on the shores of the Sea of Marmara. In addition of the deceased, another 8 police officers and a security force member were injured.
During an operation at a specific address, the Islamic State group terrorists opened fire on our heroic police officers. Sadly, 3 of our brave police officers were martyred in this treacherous attack. 8 police officers and 1 security guard were also wounded. The operation was conducted with great sensitivity due to the presence of women and children in the house where the terrorists were located. 5 women and 6 children at the address were safely evacuated. 6 terrorists were killed in the ensuing shootout. These terrorists were Turkish citizens.
The next day, 357 suspects were apprehended across 21 provinces in coordinated raids early in the morning. According to the local media, officers seized documents, digital materials, as well as a number of weapons including knives and bullets in the nationwide police operations. The raids continued on Wednesday when another 125 suspected Islamic State group members were apprehended in simultaneous operations carried out in 25 provinces. Security was beefed up ahead of the New Year celebrations in Istanbul, Turkey's largest city, where more than 50,000 police and other officials were on duty to ensure a peaceful and safe start to 2026. On the 19th of December, the United States had launched a wave of airstrikes against the Islamic State group's positions across central Syria, in retaliation for the killing of 3 Americans, 2 US soldiers and a civilian interpreter, who were killed by the Islamic State gunmen during an ambush earlier this month. Syria's President Ahmed al-Shara, who has close ties to the Turkish government, has vowed to work with the US and Europe to root out surviving elements of Islamic State group. But the question is, will it be easier said than done to ensure that there are no safe havens for the Islamic State group on the Syrian as well as Turkish territory?
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of World at War. If you want to reach out to me with any comments, feedback or suggestions, please feel free to do so on the ID that you're seeing on your screens. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.